Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Superman and Lois. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So this episode, we focus on this episode being the little mirror to the last episode, where now we're focused entirely on Clark in the Bizarro world, which I love that opening with the title card going backwards like that, and even distorting the, because they've done the backwards thing before, but this time they also distorted the, and messed with the theme song at the beginning too. And I do like that we kind of get to really experience and get to know the Bizarro versions of everyone. Obviously, there's a lot about this world we really don't get to dive into, but it's interesting finding out Clark in this world doesn't exist. He is pure Kal-El. So, and this episode, at least Bizarro, gave me very Homelander vibes. And the fact is that he doesn't have, like, the secret identity. He's just Kal-El all the time. And it doesn't seem like he was raised by the Kents. So it almost feels like, oh, there's almost a little bit of a red sun thing going on here. But it seems like he was probably raised in the U.S. Or maybe he just grew up in an orphanage or something. I don't know. But it definitely has Homelander vibes to it at the very least. I mean, I guess interesting timing too, because this is slight spoilers, but not really. In the Batman, Bruce is kind of like not your traditional Bruce Wayne, because he's very much Batman all the time because he hasn't really crafted the identity. There's almost an interesting parallel here with, in this universe, on this world, Clark never, well, Kal-El never, like, created, he never spent time as just a regular human. He always, like, superhero all the time. And seeing the juxtaposition of how not having that human side heavily affected his life. And once again, kind of playing into the Homelander / The Boys vibe, he's pretty much a celebrity. His entire family, there seems to be no, like, secret identity thing going on. It's like, yeah, this is me, Kal-El, and here's my children, and here's my wife, Lois. So that was interesting. Obviously learning other things about the world, too. Everything that, I guess, should typically be spherical, like the world, which I'm so curious how people, flat Earth theory people are going to feel about that. It's like, oh, it's not a flat Earth, it's a square Earth. How are people going to feel about that? Just on some level, it makes you go, how would they? That'd be interesting too. What would be the Bizarro version of that? Oh, the world. You think the world is? It's like, oh, instead of flat theory, it's like, oh, you're a nut job for believing the world is spherical, because, like, oh, it's like, no, the world is square, you idiot, and there's people out here who believe that the world is spherical or something. Like, that'd be interesting, and I think that'd be a little, like, little cheekiness, you know, just to think about. But just when you really dive into the implications of what it can mean, is just fascinating. Because it doesn't just stop with the world, it makes you wonder, does every spherical object actually a cue? Because you see someone later on playing pool, and all the balls, instead of being spherical balls, they're cubes, which I'm like, that's gotta be weird to play. But I mean, it's like, right, when it's all you've never known in that universe, like, it just kind of, it is what it is. You just get used to it when it's all you've ever known. But regardless, Clark ended up running into, well, Bizarro, like his Bizarro's mother. And at first I thought it was kind of interesting how Clark was speaking their language, and then, like, later on, jumping around a little bit, that Anderson did. Because the moment that body was there and he was like, Anderson, I was like, that can't be Anderson, is he? I was like, really? I was like, that's kind of anticlimactic, but it turns out it's not Anderson. In fact, it's Anderson's doppelganger. But regardless, Anderson never got good at it, but then I was like, right, Clark's really good at picking up languages. Like, we know that he knows, like, a multitude of languages, so it's like, right, the way his mind works and stuff, he probably really quickly picked up on a language. So it's easier for him to easily, and I think they did the easy thing of just making it seem like, and now everyone's talking in a way you can understand. Just because everyone's talking backwards, it's just, it's going to be easier. They only use that when it's like, oh, here's God, I just said it, Anderson talking to Chrissy, and because he's talking forward, which it's forwards to him, but even to them it seems backwards. Even though they speak backwards, it's not like, oh my God, this guy, he's speaking forwards. It's like, no, he's speaking backwards, because I mean, that, and once again, it's just funny to think about because it is all about perspective. Because from their perspective, for him, it's like, oh, I'm speaking forward, you guys are speaking backwards. But it's like, no, we're speaking forward, you're speaking backwards. It's relative to each person's perspective. And I just thought about that. I was like, that's fascinating. But it's like, right, that's why Anderson never caught up on it, because Clark's a Kryptonian and he knows how to quickly adjust to that. So, like, I'm sure, like, Jonathan, like, quickly, like, adapts to that as well, like, and can, because he easily, but I don't know if, that's why I'm trying to think, does he ever switch languages? Well, no, because, yeah, he does. And when he's talking to Lois and them, he switches languages, which is interesting because Clark never did. But that might be because he's so in a much a weaker state that his powers are, like, he just doesn't feel like using this world's language. Like, he doesn't want to talk like this world. But Jonathan comes here and does, which I find fascinating. But why didn't Bizarro do that? Regardless. Clark is spending time with Bizarro John, and it turns out Bizarro John actually works with Allie, and I think it's kind of an interesting, once again, juxtaposition, but also parallel to both worlds. Clark has a complicated relationship with Jonathan for different reasons. It's just a thing of, in our Clark, Jonathan didn't meet his expectations, and maybe the flip side of it, kind of in this world too, is that it's like, I'm your father, and what I say goes. It's like that both of them, Jonathan hasn't rebelled like Bizarro Jonathan did, but I think that's fascinating. But once again, it's like, Clark lives in this whole celebrity. It's like, oh, I'm going to take pictures with you guys, and someone was in danger. And Clark was so caught up in the glitz and the glam and taking photos and stuff, he didn't save the person that was falling to their death. Jonathan did. And now it's like, oh, you're out in the spotlight. And him and Jonathan and Jordan have like a very contentious relationship, because Jonathan's the one that's kind of got powers now, and it's like, oh, Jordan's kind of the weak human of the family, which, once again, just the juxtaposition of Jordan having powers in the other world and Jonathan and his mom having a good relationship. Or, you know, obviously it comes with its issues, but they have a good relationship because they're the ordinary people in the family. And I love that Jordan's the one that's like, oh, you should go by Superboy. He's like, really? Are you trying to, like, embarrass me? He's like, I'm sorry, I thought it was a good name. And Kal-El was like, no. Which is interesting, because so he's not even Superman in this world. He's just Kal-El. So it's like, right, you're going to be Jor-El, son of Kal-El. It's like, it's a mouthful, but okay. And I do like that some of his aesthetic, like, obviously the pants and kind of, like, the jacket, I think that's a very, I mean, maybe, and do correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not well-versed in all things comic book related, but I think that's a very, like, retro, or at least some versions of Superboy, like, where's that outfit? Some versions of Superboy, like, I think a more current version of Superboy, well, I think there are versions of Superboy that dresses very much like Clark, and Superman, and then, like, I think the current, because the current, in the current continuity, I believe, Jonathan is Superman. Like, he's taken up that mantle, and he's just legitimately just wearing the suit and everything. So, but I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, because I think, like I said, I think the jacket and everything, that might be like an old school Superboy clothing, like I said, like the leather jacket and stuff like that. Stylistically, it's not the same, but it kind of gives me Superboy from Young Justice vibes. Obviously, we're talking about two different iterations of Superboy, but still. So I thought that was interesting. But to know that, like, eventually it gets to that glitz and that glamour, and you eventually get to the point that he got absorbed by it. Because he was trying to fill some void in himself, and that void was never having his father's attention, because his dad was off being the superhero. Once again, Clark found a balance between being a father and being Superman, whereas in this world, he's Superman all the time, so he wasn't there for his children or Lois, because he just dedicated himself. And then it's just like, right, I'm off being a superhero, but then I'm also off, like, reaping the benefits of, like, oh man, here I am, like, at award shows and this and that. Like I said, the glitz and glamour. Like, it definitely, I keep stressing this because I think it's the series that really resonates this point, is I definitely got The Boys vibes from it because of the whole, like, superheroes being worshipped as celebrities. I thought that was so fascinating. But once again, Jonathan was trying to fill a hole in his heart, just because of things between him and his dad, because it's like, oh, here you are, I can't even go out and save people on my own, I have to be babysat by my dad. And to some extent, I was almost like the way Clark was looking at one point in time when Jonathan started getting all the glitz and glam. I was like, is he actually feeling like, oh, like I'm fading from the stars? Like I'm not the big celebrity I was anymore. Jonathan's kind of taking some of the limelight. I thought that's where it was coming from, but it's like, no, I'm your father. You're disobeying me. You don't do anything without my permission. And Jonathan rebelled. And so, whereas on the flip side, Jonathan is trying to do everything to get his father's trust back, this Jonathan's going to the other, because despite Clark being kind of mad at Jonathan right now and the issues that stem from that, he was there as a father, which Bizarro Jonathan didn't have that. And so Hope trying to fill some hole in himself, trying to fix himself, because everyone feels like there's something missing and they fill that void with something else. You know, vices typically ends up being some people's antidote for that. And he ended up getting sucked into Allie's religion and stuff like that, and ends up being a part of it. At the same time, you know, after Jonathan was with Allie, Lois and Jordan left him, and he's like, I'm a superhero, Lois. What do you? He's like, fine. He's like, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have all that you have. Leave, go then. And you're like, whoa. Because it seems like he was getting high off of kryptonite, and I was like, okay, because like most of the episode, he's just normal, and then eventually later on when you see him after some time passing, he looks like the Bizarro we came to see over the course of the show. So I'm like, oh, I guess he kept getting high on kryptonite to increase his strength, and I guess maybe it eventually like broke his body down. Like that's the adverse reactions of him getting high off of it. I guess it'd be like maybe the equivalency of maybe Clark getting high off of I was about to say yellow kryptonite, maybe that's, but it's like, right, maybe it just naturally took its toll on him getting high all the time, and just like those scars and his skin looking the way it is pretty much like, right, like someone who has lesions and like stuff on their face from, you know, like meth or something like that. So maybe that's what that's supposed to be, a little kind of the Kryptonian version of that. Sores and all that from, essentially getting high off of kryptonite. But to know that he kind of pushed his family away because he was so adamant about like, no, I could get it all back. It's, you know, it started taking its toll because Jonathan leaving, him getting mixed up with Allie, it just slowly but surely that family started getting chipped away. It was just Lois blamed herself because she's like, right, I wasn't much of a mother for you. Like, we never taught you that there's more than just the fame and stuff like that. Because at the very least, Jonathan and Jordan have Clark and Lois to ground them as not just be superheroes. Like even Jordan, it's like, right, he has the human foundation. Jonathan and them didn't have that because it's like, right, they had the glitz and the glamour. Like they had the celebrity life for probably a lot of their life, if not all of it. Whereas a lot of they were and have always been sheltered and continue to be sheltered from that in the world we know, because Clark doesn't put himself in the spotlight like that. So I thought that was fascinating. We also got insight into Anderson, who, when he came here, he tried to fuse with his other self. But the moment he did, Jonathan, because Allie told him to stop it, because it's like, right, the moment they were around each other, the Bizarro Anderson, like, saw the other Anderson's memories and saw what he's did and experienced, and it's like, right, they were going to fuse together until Jonathan burned him alive. It's like, yo, and even Jonathan was like, that's the first time I've ever killed someone. You could tell he was reluctant to do it. And, I also thought it was interesting, too, that Chrissy's the one that... it turns out because she was part of the resistance, so she was working with Lois, Jordan, and Sam to make... to fight back against Allie. I even love that she's like, Olsen, and like, okay, we didn't see him, but there's an Olsen working there, so it's like, okay, is his sister Kelly? I don't think I've ever looked into like whether his sister Kelly is from the comics or not, or whether she like was an original creation for Supergirl. She probably exists in the comics. I don't know. I don't know if I've ever heard his sister referenced before, comic book wise, because maybe she never really because maybe Jimmy's always like the Olsen that always got the attention. Maybe Kelly never did, if she exists in the comics. But I was like, oh, it's kind of. But immediately my brain's like, oh, I'd assume just because of that it'd be like Jimmy, but I guess it could be Kelly. She says Olsen, and then she's talking to someone named Janet. I don't think that's the Olsen she was referencing. Maybe someone else in the office who maybe wasn't there, and then she was just like, whatever, Janet, and moved on to Janet. But the heartbreaking thing especially because Anderson's in a world where he's all alone, like he can't communicate with anyone. His other half is dead, so once again, I wasn't sure if there's any ramifications for that. Doesn't seem like it has been for Clark, because they aren't connected. They are two separate beings, so... But the fact is, he was in the middle of fusing with his, so I wonder if there'd be any issue there. Doesn't seem like it, but... The moment he finds out from Jordan, like, wait... Superman was your dad, and he's trying to communicate it, but they can't understand him. But he's like, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was so caught up in what I lost. I killed someone. I never bothered trying to think on who or what he was, because I was so focused and consumed by my own sadness and my own rage and trying to feel what was inside of me as well. But now I realize, like, I took took him from his family. And when he talks to Clark later on, he's like, right, I'm so, like, wait, you still want to save me even after everything I've done? He's like, Clark is like, I still believe no one's beyond saving. I was like, once again, I'm like, that's Superman for you. Always being hopeful, you know. I mean, I think, well, to be fair, it's not just, obviously it's Supergirl too. It's like always wanting to believe the best in people. That sigil, the House of L sigil of hope. I mean, it reigns so true. Now, because he's like, right, I came to this world because I needed to prove so wholeheartedly to myself. I already pegged you as the bad guy, and so I needed an excuse to come here to be like, right, the other version of you was a bad guy too. Now he realizes, like, right, Bizarro was just trying to do everything he could, and that was also something Clark was trying to explain to Jonathan's like, despite your issues, every parent tries to do the right thing. Your dad was just trying to make up for a lot of wrong, and that's what it was. Even if it cost him his life, which it did, he was willing to make that sacrifice to try and get Jonathan back, to try and make things right, to make up for the mistakes, you know, his family being broken up the way it was. And despite everything Jonathan's done, like, the sad thing is, even if he fuses with himself, there will always be a hole in his heart, because he will never have a chance to make things right with his dad. And maybe that's something luckily all this kind of distracts, I say John, but I should just specify Bizarro Jonathan. Which, once again, both of them want to make things right with their dads. Sadly, Bizarro Jonathan won't have that chance. Jonathan does, though. And I think we will get to that, because I think all of this kind of made Clark realize, like, right, I've kind of been imposing, like, how I view, like, I haven't really been giving Jonathan the fair shot. Like, he messed up, yes, but I haven't been giving him a fair opportunity, and he's doing his best to make it up. So I think all of this is going to, when he gets the opportunity, he's going to make up with Jonathan. So, but back to it, Anderson now understands, is like, right, this was Bizarro's family, so you have a version of your family on the other world too. And he's like, right, he's like, that's why you kept stuff from me. It was all for an attempt to protect him, wasn't it? And then Clark was like, yeah. And he's just like, I'm so sorry. I got so wrapped up in everything. But it's like, right. He's like, we're going to get you back to that other world so you can keep those pendants away from Allie. Which both Allie show up along with Lana and his brother. Which is so interesting, because the moment they showed up together, I was like, right. Bizarro hinted to who his significant, Tauro's significant other was going to be in the other world, and it was like, the moment they're together, I'm like, oh, it's Lana, isn't it? And it's like, it totally is. Once again, Clark has no association with, Bizarro had no association with Smallville. So, like, he's like, yeah, just something drew me to Smallville, and so he has no connection to Lana whatsoever. So it's just interesting that these two end up together, which is interesting too, considering, like, right, Lana is in a process of getting divorced, and Bizarro Lana and Bizarro Tauro got together. So, but it's kind of also sweet and kind of also sad that Tauro and Clark have a complicated relationship. They've been on opposite sides, but they're better. Whereas Bizarro Superman and Bizarro Tauro are so close, but ended up on opposite sides. It seemed like they had such a loving relationship. Because Tauro was a good guy in this world, the inverse of Tauro in the other world. And married Lana, and it's like, right, if you ever need anything from me, brother, I'll always be there for you. But he got swayed by Allie's pitch that, right, it might be the best way to save people. But it's also very cult-like, where it's like, right, you're not 100% sold on it yourself, but someone you care about, in this particular case, Bizarro Lana, convinced Bizarro Tauro to kind of jump on board on it. Because it's like, right, she's the one that fully believes it. And he was like, right, if you promise you would do anything for me, brother, you know, he was begging Bizarro Tauro to walk away, but he wouldn't. And now they ended up on opposite sides, and it made Clark even more alone. He didn't have his brother. He didn't have his wife. He didn't have either of his children. He was completely alone, and that's what pushed him to be where he was. And now Clark has to face off against all of them, and as well as Jonathan. That was heartbreaking. Poor Anderson never had he was on his path to redemption. I was like, is he going to make it out of this? Nope. The Anderson we know have died too, but he sacrificed himself. Jonathan killed both versions of Anderson, interestingly enough. Burned the other one alive, and this one crushed his chest. He didn't have any other, ex-kryptonite. He was on his last vial, so it's kind of like all do or die in this moment, because they couldn't let Allie get it. But when given the opportunity, Tauro ends up helping Clark, because it's like, right, I failed my brother before, and now I'll never have an opportunity to make things right. I'm not going to fail. Seeing you here again reminded me that, I have an opportunity to, so go help your son. As Jonathan, both Alleys are fusing together. Clark chases after Bizarro Jonathan as he's making his way to the other world to fuse with his counterpart. But luckily, Clark is on his way. I didn't talk about it, but picking up with that whole thing I should have talked about at the beginning, I really like when Clark's going through the portal, it's constantly ripping his flesh and his costume back apart. I was wondering whether it was going to be a thing of, his suit was going to be tattered, and that maybe the reason why his wounds are healing is because of it. But it's no, it's basically being broken apart on a molecular level. He's so strong because of being a Kryptonian that it's not fully breaking him apart. His body's he's moving fast enough and building up, I think, enough wind resistance that it's not completely tearing him apart on a molecular level like it did everyone else. So when he kind of finally comes through, his molecules kind of finally fuse back together. So you see some wounds, and he almost looks like he's got a Wolverine healing factor in that moment. But I think that's kind of the explanation for it. Either way, I thought it was pretty dope how they handled that. But just at the end, we don't get to fully see what Allie's like in that other world. Because Clark tried to reach out to her saying, no, don't do this. You're not going, this isn't the way you help people. You're going to be basically genociding another world. She's like, they're not going to die. We're going to become whole beings. But it's right, an entire world will die because either everyone from this world will because people from either side will disappear. And there'll only be one person, so one world will be completely barren, and everyone will be gone if you do this. But it's Allie, she's like, oh, who gets to dictate, what's right in this situation? You, Superman? But it's who made you leader to decide all of humanity's fate too? It's it's pot calling the kettle black, type of situation. So I am very, very excited to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. I'm curious to see what Allie looks like when this is all said and done. I'm also curious, is it going to end with a situation of the worlds bleeding together? Will there be a lot of overlap? It'll be a situation where both versions of everybody will coexist on the same world, maybe just amongst the main characters. Will definitely be interesting to see if that's where things kind of go, but Jonathan's there with Jonathan. Luckily, Jordan's there to help him out, and should be able to help out until his dad gets there. But also, they are on this other world, so Jonathan will not, well, because there's no red sun, so Jonathan isn't going to get stronger off of that. When a sun comes up and the yellow sun hits him, he's going to be losing power, so we'll see how things kind of shake up from there. But I'm excited to see what happens going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.